we come to the second panel discussion for today, building a new paradigm for women, how men can help. Around the world, nearly 2/3 of illiterate people are women, a proportion that has remained unchanged for 2 decades. Despite progress made towards gender equality, women and girls continue to be held back because of their gender. So how do we unleash women and girls' full potential? Incredible progress has been made across the globe by increasing support for girls to go to school, addressing violence and discrimination against women, and increasing women's economic empowerment. But in order to achieve gender equality, we need to look at the root causes of why women and girls are discriminated against in the first place. When a society disregards a woman's individual and inherent abilities based on predefined stereotypical beliefs, it hinders her ability to fulfill her potential. Women's point of view and perspective need to be heard, especially in decision making, and it doesn't always have to be top down. Men too can help in building this new paradigm for women as an equal and complementary force in our society. But achieving gender equality is going to take some hard questions and trying innovative approaches. And of course, to talk more about this topic, I would like to invite our moderator for today, Aldwyn Altony. Based in Australia, Aldwyn is a mass media marketing expert, known as the Media Queen. She is a TV host, speaker, photojournalist, and author of multiple international best-selling books, including the Amazon #1 bestseller, My Voice Volume 2. Aldwyn is passionate about inspiring truth and good news in mass media to help decrease depression and suicide rates and lift people's spirits. For those of you who want to find out more about her and connect with her, we've shared her details on the chat group. With that, over to you, Aldwyn.
Thank you so much, Neera. I love your work. And wow, what an amazing panel we just had. My goodness, no pressure here, no pressure whatsoever as to, it's not about better or worse. However, that was extraordinary and well done on putting this together. Extraordinary. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here today with such amazing panelists as well. And we're going to have a great time with this topic. Now, I must say, I love men. I don't know about you, but I love men. Now, I have had my issues with men in the past, just a few issues here and there. Don't know about you, but, I've just had a few little issues in the past. However, let me tell you that did you know that men and women were actually undifferentiated, as in all fetuses were exactly the same, not male, not female, up to about 6 or 7 weeks of gestation. Isn't that interesting? And then at about 6 or 7 weeks, some non-gender babies ended up developing testes. Isn't that interesting? And so really inherently at the root of each of us, isn't that interesting choice of term there? At the root of each of us is we're actually all one, I believe. We are all one humanity on the planet, male, female. We've had so many issues with both sexes, and now we've got so many people around the world not knowing whether they're male or whether they're female. They're born female. Some of them think they're male. Some of them born male think they're female. It's all become a really big mess in many ways. However, what we're going to discuss today is how we can bring peace amongst the genders, bring peace amongst the nations. And the beautiful panel we have here from all over the world, I'm so excited to be having this conversation about males and females with our amazing panelists. So building a new paradigm for women, how can men help? And in fact, even we could turn this around and building a new paradigm for men, how women can help. Right? It's interesting, there's a lot of talk out there about, women get abused by men, etc. We've got the Women Life Freedom movement happening across the world right now. This whole women life freedom thing is just absolutely, women are standing up and saying, let's be treated equally. Please treat us as equals. We actually are equals. And so discussing this today, we have an amazing panel we're going to be hearing from. We have Vikas Shrivastava, we have Radhika Uni, and I hope I'm pronouncing these correctly, Elena Liapunova, Tato Belang, and Claude Sasulas. Welcome to our amazing panel. Wow, such a phenomenal panel from all around the world. And so to get us started here today on this topic, building a new paradigm for women, how men can help, I would love to hear from the panelists their thoughts about this and why this is important for them. Why is it important to build a new paradigm for women? So let's go around and chat with our amazing panelists here. Let's start with Elena. Let's start with you. Why is it important to build a new paradigm for women, do you think? And love for you to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for amazing entry lines, and that's very inspiring. So I'm a CEO and founder of AI for Best Recruiting, which is a global search firm, and we recruit with longevity in mind for different science and technology startups around the globe. Originally, I'm from Siberia. I was born in Russia and I moved to the United States about 20 years ago. But in fact, I actually just moved to Hong Kong 2 months ago, and I'm going to be spending my time between Hong Kong and Miami going forward. So that's exciting. My first 10 years of my career, I did spend in corporate America on Wall Street, and I worked for JP Morgan and a few other banks, and I did work in HR and recruiting. And I do have like a lot of stories to tell on, about diversity, and of course about, how men helped women and how they could do it better. So I'm very excited to be a part of this discussion, and I look forward to it.
Fantastic. And of course, in the women life freedom movement right now, if you could just all just mute yourselves while you're not speaking, that'd be great. We're getting a little bit of feedback. In the women life freedom movement right now, we actually have a lot of men that are standing beside the women who are actually standing for equal rights as well, which is really cool to see. So we've got amazing unity. There's a shift happening out there like nothing before, right? There is a shift. And I think more and more, particularly with COVID and all the dramas of the last few years, I think more and more people are realizing how important it is right now to unite in harmony across the nations, across the genders, across all of our seeming differences. We are one humanity, one people on this planet. When you look at the whole of the universe, the earth is small compared to the whole universe, right? And we're all in this together. So let's start cooperating, work better together. And how can men help with that to build a new paradigm for women? How can men help? And so we're going to get onto this topic. Firstly, we'll just quickly introduce all of our amazing panelists, and then we'll look at why this is important for each of our panelists here today. Why is it important to build a new paradigm for women, and how men can help, and their ideas around that. So let's go to Vikas next. Let's go to the man here, one of the men in the room here. Over to Vikas.
Thank you, Alvin. You did a fantastic job, by the way, in pronouncing my surname. Even my relatives have difficulty pronouncing that name. But you did a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Vikas. I'm based in Singapore, and I'm the country manager for Quest, an organization called Quest Singapore, which is one of the largest technology staffing organizations. So we employ close to 1,500 people here in Singapore, and 40% of them is actually female. I know it's not 50%, but I can tell you, we used to be at 56%, but thanks to COVID and some of the regulatory changes that happened in Singapore, that percentage did go down to 40%. But we are working very, very hard to bring it back to 50%. But with regards to your question, why is this important to me? Well, look, I think this is important to me both personally and professionally. Personally, well, honestly, it's a long story and I really don't want to bore you guys. But the sum and the substance of the personal experience is that through my various experiences while I was growing up, I realized that prosperity only comes to those houses and businesses where women are respected. and have an equal say in the decision making. So from a professional standpoint, I've been in the talent and the workforce business for about 18 years. And I think if there is one linear and constant trend that I've seen in this industry, is that there is something called talent shortage, which is getting bad to worse. I mean, it's getting harder and harder for companies to find the talent in the key positions. Now, for surely, the evolution of skills is a major factor, but the two single biggest driver for the talent shortage is actually demographics and the underrepresentation of women at workplace. I'm sure all of you have recently heard of the tech layoffs, right? At Microsoft, Amazon, Stripe, Twitter, Coinbase, and many other companies. Guess what is the commonality between all of these companies, apart from the fact that they are in tech? They're all headed by male CEOs. I'm not making any generalization because I'm a male myself, but and of course there are plenty of external reasons as well for these layoffs, but this doesn't change the fact that only 41 out of the 500 Fortune 500 companies have female CEOs. So look, simply put, having more women at manager level, at mid-managers level, and senior leadership, C-suite, board level, I think it just makes better business sense. It's good for the culture of the company. It drives profitability. It makes businesses resilient. And when companies do well, and rather when economies do well, companies do well, right? So when economies is good, it's good for my industry. I'm sure it's good for many other industries. I mean, is it any surprise that, the greatest period of the global prosperity that we saw between 1980s and 2018, coincided with the world making a reasonable amount of, I would say, progress in the women representation at workplace. But look what happened since 2019, right? The gender gap has just become horrible. And look at the world today. It's in total mess right now. I mean, we are talking about recession, high inflation, a war, by the way, has been thrust on us. Can you imagine if the president of Russia was a female? You think she would have actually attacked Ukraine? I mean, I don't think so. A recent McKinsey report recently said that because of COVID, the gender gap between, or the gender parity at the workplace has actually been pushed by another 40 years. That's 4 long decades. This gap, by the way, was already at 99 years, right? And if this gap is not addressed, we're looking at basically a loss of about $1 trillion in global GDP. I mean, do we really want to live in a world which is getting poorer, where the standard of living and the quality of life is getting bad? Honestly, I don't want to live in that world. You can call me selfish, but it's for reasons like this why it's important to maintain and plug that gap, right? And as to why it is important for me to participate in a discussion. By the way, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I think I forgot to mention the KitKat team of Shikhai and Neera. You guys are doing a fantastic job.
Wow, well said, Vikas. Amazing. I love it. Absolutely love it. And love to hear now from our others. We've got Tato next. Let's have a chat with Tato. Just let us know a little bit about yourself and why this topic is important to you today, building a new paradigm for women, how men can help.
Thanks, Aldrin, and thank you to be invited on this platform today. My name is Tato Bilang, and I'm out here in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm an executive coach, I'm a professional speaker, and I do a lot of work with leaders, and I do leadership development. So when I did my master's degree, my topic was around how coaching can help female leaders to embrace their authenticity. So authenticity is a topic that I do a lot of work around, and in my coaching practice, I focus on that because it bothered me. And so to answer the question, it bothered me why, as women progress in their ladder, the higher they become, the more they lose themselves, the essence of who they are. And so for me, this topic has always been a challenge and a burden to me, simply because of where I grew up and how I grew up. So I grew up in a rural community, in a rural village, and I saw how my mother and other women, irrespective of, the contribution that they put on the table, there were always barriers around, and they always had to push through, and always had to prove, their worth. and have to fight for their seat around the table. And so I grew up with that, and it always been a burden to say, but why is it that we can't be seen as just a fellow human being, right? And that's why I thoroughly enjoyed the previous panel session, because it was touching on some of these things. And so for me, what's important is, and just to expand to what Vigas was saying, my research also revealed that the number of women leaders, that inclusion of those women leaders correlates with improved corporate performance. So it's research based, it's there, the numbers say for themselves. And it's something that, and for somebody, and some people say that this is an overspoken and overlooked. It's like there's so much work around this. And I'm saying, yes, until the time that it's a normal thing that we are seeing as normal, that we see me as a leader and not as a female leader or woman leader, then we need to continuously interrogate this topic and talk about it. We need to get to a point where we stop beating around the bush about the problem. We need to name the problem, identify and name the problem, so that we know how to solve for the problem. I think that's what we need to do. That we need to stop acting as if the problem doesn't exist. And so we need to, once we identify what the problem is and what is out of balance, then we can actually do something about it. And until then, it will just remain just a nameless pain. Thanks.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. I love that. Absolutely. To actually make change in any area, first you need to get that there is an issue there, right? And, a lot of people out there, it's like, sometimes it's like seeing The Walking Dead, it's like half the people out there, are you really conscious? Sometimes I feel like sort of tapping on people and going, hello, are you there? And this is the thing is that, some people find it easier to live life burying their head in the sand rather than actually looking at what's the reality of the situation right now and how we can be the change. Because sometimes these issues can seem like such massive issues and then, gosh, what can I do as little old me? However, if everyone has that opinion that what can we do as little old me, then nothing's going to shift. Right. And so it's actually firstly recognizing, there's something that can be done here, and actually having the courage and the confidence to actually step forward and to speak our truth on that. I love that, Tato. Thank you so much. And now, Radhika, let's go over to you. Radhika Uni, just let us know a little bit about yourself and why this topic is important to you today.
Yeah, thanks, Alvin, and thank you to the KitKat team for inviting me. So a little bit about myself. My name is Radhika. I am a managing director at Accenture, where I lead one of the technology platforms, one of our business groups here based in Singapore. I had a bit of an interesting background in that I lived in at least 4 to 5 different countries in Africa, so Nigeria, Kenya, Botswana, South Africa. And I grew up with a very sort of family where it was okay to be a woman and it was definitely okay to do whatever you want. And as I was growing up, I remember with my brother, we'd always be very competitive. So I wouldn't let him even get a single point over me in anything. So there was a lot of competitive spirit between both of us. And when we shifted back to India is when I really, this sort of dawned on me what it means, what gender itself means. And I think it took me a little bit of a journey, because as I started working and I was on my own, I was very focused on work and outcomes. And even though I largely worked in male-dominated industries or areas, it didn't bother me too much. And I remember in one of my companies, we'd have a diversity event, and I'd be like, okay, I don't have time to go for that. I'm too busy. I'm too focused on my work. What is diversity all about? But as I grew in my career and I had my child and I went in for maternity and I came back in, it really struck me what it really means, what is your gender? And you start seeing as you try to rise up the corporate ranks, you realize how people look at you with your gender. Often you are a female in the room. I mean, whether you like it or not, it's there. So for me, what's exciting about today in the world that we're in, there's a lot of awareness about the importance of equity, and not just for females, but for everyone. And the fact that it's not just one group, or it's not just women. It needs all of us to come together. And the concept of equity is really different at different places, right? So you brought up this whole thing about the movement that's taking place now. So whether it is India, Iran, or US, or Canada, everything is at different places in terms of their maturity and awareness. So I feel that all of us coming together, and there's a very good, varied set of panelists here, our views and thoughts in terms of how can we bring that equity? How can, if you focus on women itself, how can men support us? And I like the fact that you said that, you love men. So there is no men bashing. I mean, it's something that all of us feel that I also love men. And I feel that some of my biggest sponsors and people who have really helped me have been men in my industry. Yeah, so excited to be here.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Radhika. I love that. And absolutely none of us would be here if it wasn't for men. Let's face it, right? None of us would be here. So thank goodness for the men in our lives. And did you know, by the way, that you've beaten about 1 billion swimmers to get to the finish line just by being born? Isn't life extraordinary? Aren't we extraordinary human beings? The first race you ever won, my friends. And so if you've ever had any negative thoughts about yourself, just remember you've beaten 1 billion others to get to the finish line just by being born, okay? How extraordinary is that? Thank goodness for the men in our lives. All right, now Claude. Claude, are you with us? It just seems to have
Yes, I am. I really apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can't see you though.
I'm sorry, I've got an issue with my IT. And having been in the IT industry for 25 years, I think it's not a very good sign, but I'm going to just reconnect.
Okay, got you. All right, well, maybe we'll come back to you in just a sec. Claude, it's good to know you're there. Thank you so much. We saw you there for a second and then you disappeared. Okay, so while you come back in there, Claude, we might come back to you in just a sec then. Oh, here we go. I can see you come. Oh, there you are. There you are. Claude, back in the room. Excellent. Okay.
I'm really sorry.
Awesome. All right. So, Claude, if you could share a bit about yourself.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. A bit
Can
about
you hear
yourself. Yes, we got you. All right.
Good.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I really apologize for this. I don't know what's going on. So I've been in the tech industry, as I said, for about 25 years, and really mostly running customer-facing organization. I've worked for US companies, Chinese, Indian, South African companies, and obviously this topic of gender equality has been. I was just trying to reflect, how long has it been on the table for? And for me, I'd say probably early 2010 that we started talking about it. 20 years ago, there was no discussion about having 80% of men or more. And I think I'd say it's probably about 10 years ago that the topic started to eat up, maybe because the proportions or the disproportions were going, were just growing so much. But there's just, one, I think for me, there's some good news and the bad news. The bad news is, I was just watching a video from, I'm sure you've all seen it, but from Anne Hathaway, the UN, Women Goodwill Ambassador. And she said that at this rate of progress, it will take 300 years to achieve gender equality. Okay, 300 years. I mean, someone said 99 years plus 40, whatever, right? So it's a long time. So that's obviously the bad news. The good news is when you start looking at companies, looking at government, looking around you, looking on the net, there are so many initiatives to change this. And I think things are changing. And I'll just take an example. So I'm actually based in Paris, and I've lived in London, in the US, various places. But I was just meeting with a former colleague the other day, and I said, well, what are you up to? And he works for a really fast-growing company, 2,000 people in the tech. These guys are need to raise raising about $500 million a year. I said 2,000 employees, growing massively. And I said, what are you up to? Well, I said, I've got 2-month paternity leave because the law in France now is a month. When I had my kids, it was 2 days. Now it's a month. And the company, which is really struggling to recruit people to keep, they basically have added to another month of paternity leave for all employees. And for me, and there are so many initiatives that I could go through like that, which means that it's all going in the same direction. It will never be fast enough. And again, I don't know whether it will take 300 years or 200 or 100 or 40 or whatever. But for me, when you look at these, all these initiatives that are, that are underway, I think it's a really good, really good sign. And I think for me, there's also, two approaches, right? There's a top-down approach, which some governments have taken, which is basically impose parity or some parity or move towards parity. And there's obviously the bottoms-up approach with, the promotion of role models, in various initiatives. I don't think there's a company today, a large company, where this topic is not high on the agenda. It's like climate change. There's everybody now. How serious, are all these companies? They're probably not all as. They're probably not all as serious as. But overall, it is a topic, and I think for me, it's half of the problem solved if you start addressing the problem. And when you look at and I'll take just to finish the example of the French government, which about 10 years ago, in fact, just put a law out and imposed 40%. They said within 10 years we need 40% now. Don't ask me why it wasn't 50, but 40% of women on board and exec committees. Today, France, my understanding is that it's the #1 country in terms of percentage of women on the boards with 46%. So for me, it's both a top-down approach, because you're not going to change the mentalities. You need both a top-down approach with laws and also the bottoms-up with initiatives like, again, there's dozens or hundreds of initiatives everywhere, going on. That's the way I would look at it.
Wow, so much in that, Claude. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I must say, the French men have quite a reputation for loving their women over there, I must say. And I don't know about you, Claude, but I've heard all about it, these Frenchmen. I think you just need to speak with that French accent and the women just get very excited. So on that, let's come back to Elena here. And actually the 300 years, now I think that's being a little bit pessimistic, 300 years for gender equality. I think that's, personally, I believe in the world of what's possible, right? And I don't think it's going to take 300 years. I'm not planning to hang around 300 years to watch that happen. I want it to happen in my lifetime. And I do believe that we can make it happen in this lifetime, where we can have gender equality. And it comes down to, I believe, every single person making a stand for that, being a stand for that, right? So now, Elena, I'd like to ask you a question. Now, I'd love you to give us an example of how you felt being treated unfairly working on a project with your male teammates, and what could they have done differently to make you feel appreciated and part of the team at a time when you felt being treated unfairly?
Yeah, well, I've had quite a few situations like that. And actually, back because I didn't finish why I'm super passionate about this, the topic, actually, it did happen in the beginning of my career when I graduated at 29 and I was an immigrant in the United States. I went for my first interview, and there was a guy who interviewed me, Ivy League school. He had his own recruiting company, and he told me after 15 minutes talking to me, he said, "Hey, Elena, you know what? I'm just going to be straightforward. I'm going to be very honest with you. How old are you? I was like 29. You just graduated. You have an accent, and I'm sorry, but you're a female. You're not going to succeed in this job. Just give it up." And that was my first interview. And I was sitting and just like, no, it can't be true. So it did take me a little bit of time to get over it. And I end up obviously having a successful career. I didn't give up. But back to this topic, what I would like to say is that there are some obviously examples throughout my career where men were so unsupportive, but it takes a personality, and not every woman is going to be like me saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to prove myself." So that's why it's very important for me to inspire other females to not listen to anyone. It doesn't really matter, male, female, anybody, because the truth is only within you, and only you know where you're going to get in your career. And then back to the question about being treated unfairly working in the group. So I did work for one recruiting company, and we had a boys club. So it was very apparent. It it was very kind of, I knew right away that there are a group of people that would make deals and that they would keep it between themselves, and it was just impossible to get into that group. But what I did, I worked really hard. I made, like, I became friends with all of them. They probably a year later, they started helping me. But that first year, I felt so miserable because all the deals with, the deals in recruiting, and you have to be extremely, aggressive. It's very competitive. And then the next thing I know, they closed the deal. I participated and they didn't pay, or they would, share information between themselves, and they wouldn't let me in. So it did take me some time to get into the group and become like a bro part of the group. But that was very stressful, and I wish they, I wish I've done that sooner, but that was just the culture of that company. And I think it still is the same culture. And actually, in fact, I've seen a lot of examples like that on Wall Street, where there is a group of guys and they will not let any women in. They just will not. And then I also heard stories from very senior people when they're like, oh, when there is a crisis, women are the first one who leave, who leaves the ship, because they're kind of, by their nature, they're just more protective of their family if they have a kid. So they're like, start looking for a job right away. That was actually recently. I had a conversation with someone who's very senior in their role, and it's like, I wish, I had like someone, like I had the man in that team, because that woman left once the company still, once the market started shaking. So yeah, so that's kind of my experience. But what they could do better, just give us a chance. we're great, we're smart, we're amazing, we can deliver, we're like working hard, we can, I don't know, we're everything. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Love it. Thank you, Elena. Thank you for sharing that. And, it reminds me of when I started working as a journalist. And, one of the first positions I had as a journalist sub-editor at the Gold Coast Bulletin. It was a daily paper that we had coming out Monday to Saturday. And there was an editorial meeting every single day we had with the editor, the chief of staff, and about 10 journalists. And out of those 12 people or so, there was one woman and me, and all the rest were men, right? 10 men in these leadership positions in the media. And the other woman, apart from me, was very butch. Like, when I say butch, she had short hair. She was very masculine. And this is the thing: a lot of women in the workplaces, they kind of think, oh, we've got to compete with the men. We've got to be really masculine to be taken seriously, And fast forward now 20 years, and last year I actually won a national award in Australia. It was the BX Print Media Photography Award. There were 8 finalists. 7 of the other finalists were men. And I won it as a female out of a pool of 8 men as finalists in the Media Print Photography Award, which has been very traditionally male oriented. And as I say, I love the men in my life. However, I think in certain industries, we need more balance. We need more balance, and things are shifting. Just in 20 years, we can see some massive shifts happening out there now, right, in all industries. And so this is a very exciting time, I think, for all of us to actually make some massive shifts and to be a stand for equality amongst the sexes, regardless of what sex you are or what sex you say you are, right? How many people now on Zoom events say he, she, him, her, and all, I mean, why do we even need to say that stuff? Like, what's going on in the world, And it's almost like it's just become so muddled now. So, Vikas, I'd like to come over to you now. Now, you're in the talent business, working with many clients, employing about 1,500 employees in Singapore. That's extraordinary. What issues or challenges do you see at companies when it comes to implementing gender parity, and more particularly empowering women in leadership positions?
Yeah, thank you, Alvin. Now, before I answer this specific question, if you permit me, I just want to share an incident, a story that happened to me very recently. So last week I was in Japan with my entire senior leadership of Quest. The occasion was the 15th anniversary of the company. What was nice that along with all the leaders, the spouses were also invited. Now, during one of the formal dinners, everyone was actually asked to share their experiences of how their journey has been with Quest. Many of the leaders, particularly the ones that have been since the beginning, Their usual self, right? I mean, they spoke about how hard they worked, the passion for the company, the number of air miles they've clocked, the audacity to think big, etc., etc. Many of these leaders are very, very accomplished, by the way, in their own right. But almost every member mentioned that how without the unconditional support and understanding of their spouses, there's no way this company would have gone from about $100,000 of revenue in the first year to about 2 billion right now in 15 years. And then it was my turn to speak, right? And I started thinking about actually the topic for today's discussion. And really suddenly there was this feeling of, I think, entitlement or guilt or guilty arrogance, frankly speaking, that overcame me, because I realized suddenly, who am I to help build a new paradigm for women, right? Perhaps the topic should be building a paradigm for creating successful companies, how women are already helping. So I think there is enough empirical evidence, right, which is out there that women have indirectly helped create successful companies. I think what we need is an institutionalized framework, right, to bring it to the front as to how women can actually contribute directly to the success of the companies. By the way, I apologize for digressing, but yes, talking specifically about your question on the issues of the challenges that the organizations are facing, I think the biggest stumbling block is that the agenda for the gender participation is not really driven from the top. More often than not, it's a construct that comes from HR or maybe an ESG sustainability department. It's good to consider, it's considered good to talk about this during earnings call these days because it's one of those to-do lists, right? But I think it lacks conviction from the top that it is actually a necessary tool for driving, great business outcomes. As I said, I spoke about the layoffs and how many of them actually tends to come from organizations which are headed by male CEOs. I think the other issue companies face is that the companies where there is some effort to drive it from the top, I think there are no forward-looking KPIs or metrics, right? So to simply say that we should have more women, right, in the leadership position, that's not enough. That's too generic for me, right? So companies should be able to measure what's their current status and what's the target that they want to reach, right? And then track it relentlessly. In fact, I would say tie it to the targets and the bonuses of the senior leaders, right? So in my view, for example, someone who achieves 100%, for example, of their targets, but ends up promoting 50% of the women leaders, should be given the same bonuses and the same incentives as opposed to someone who probably achieves 130% of the targets, but was only responsible for, bringing forward 30% of the representation of the workplace. Obviously, we live in a corporate world where profitability and growth is everything. So 130% target achiever basically, will get more bonuses, more commissions, etc. But I think there's a need to tie the elevation of women in the leadership to the bonuses that you make. And I think finally, the issue another issue that I see is at companies is really simply of stereotype and bias. And this is, by the way, the hardest challenge, right? Because unfortunately, no amount of metrics helps here because it is so closely related to the culture of the society from where the leaders are coming from. So bias exists when we recruit females for a job. Bias exists when we promote somebody internally for the job. And this, like any other social evils, right, can only be treated, in my view, with greater awareness and education. Now, if you go to the internet and try to look for, the impact of women at workplace, businesses, you'll find a lot of articles basically suggesting that organizations that do work on diversity and inclusion, right, are more profitable. But really, it's really hard to find hard empirical evidences and case studies. And to that, I think Tato, she mentioned that she's actually part of the research. And I think that research is critical because we need to provide, to our students at the business schools, we need to provide students, at the colleges, these hardcore empirical case studies that look, this organization worked on diversity, worked on inclusion, right? And therefore they were profitable by 30-40%. So it becomes as if a business leader that comes out or somebody who comes out of a business college fresh into the work knows at the back of the mind that one of the principles, right? One of the principles for doing well at work is to look at greater women participation. if you look at how leadership is defined these days, right, you'll hear words like collaboration, empathy, being protective, looking after, right? Now, if I tell you, how do you define the word mother? The same words will come to you, right? The same words will come to your senses. So in other words, the leadership of 21st century seems to be converging, right, to the traits that women naturally have, right? And I think we just need to have an institutional way and a framework put in place to just bring it to the front, right? And they'll naturally do well.
Oh, I love it, Vikas. That's a fantastic answer. Thank you so much for that. I love your passion around this topic too. And, I think about the yin yang of life. I think the yin yang symbol, right? We've got opposite opposing forces that work beautifully in harmony together. In some ways, men and women are quite opposite in some ways, and yet they just go beautifully together, right? The God or grand organized design, whatever, this is not a spiritual conversation, God, grand organized design, whatever your beliefs are, right? This is part of the design of human beings. We are, I believe, meant to work together in harmony. And I believe we've been conditioned through media programming. I believe we've been conditioned to live separated. We've been conditioned to live in drama. And not just in workplaces, but, look at how many relationships are failing nowadays. My parents have been together 52 years, quite extraordinary. However, most people I meet nowadays, 10 years, 20 years, about the average most relationships are lasting nowadays. I mean, this is definitely Western cultures. I don't know so much about other, in Australia, there's so many nuclear families now. And with all of this going on too, there's a lot of confusion. People don't know where they belong. They're looking for a sense of belonging across families, across workplaces, etc. And, I think the more we can learn to appreciate our differences and our similarities and work together, the more harmonious and the more peaceful we will be across the world altogether. Now, Radhika, I'd love to come over to you now. Now, you work in the tech industry, which is largely male-dominated. So you feel industry makes a difference in the way a woman succeeds, and how do we bring system change in roles which are typically male-driven?
Yeah, so I think that first, I do believe that men and women are not completely equal in the sense of, just the way that they're formed and their characteristics, right? So we want to have equity in the way that we're treated. So when we look at jobs and we look at our workplace, often there are certain roles that women tend to go to, at the other extreme, we find that men are often the decision makers in many of the other non-women dominated roles, right? So I do feel that if I look at my own journey itself, I've seen that in many cases, largely women tend to fall off the career path as they go through their own life, right? And you reach a certain point where there are hardly any women, especially in technology dominated areas. So, and I see that in a lot of cases where I go in, there are hardly any women that we find. So even though a lot of companies and firms say that we want 50% women, that talent pool is not there because they've not yet gone through that level of experience. And even though we are trying to get them on board, they're also not interested because they see certain fields as being too dominated by men, or something that they're not equipped to handle. Because they haven't gone through that whole cycle or experience. So I feel that for any sort of real large change in the corporate world, we need men to play a very active role in the way they interview, and each man has to actually be a sponsor. So they have to look at, who are these high talented women that we can bring in, and maybe they don't fit the bill exactly in terms of the experience criteria, but how do we bring them in and nurture them and grow them? And I also believe that, we can't solve like world hunger. So each one of us is sort of responsible for making a change in our sphere of influence, right? So every single action that we take in terms of how we're hiring, how we're interviewing, and more so in areas where we see that women are not very inclined to go into, right? So whether it is highly stressful sales jobs or into hardcore delivery, things which I see very few women leaders in. I think the key part of that is how are men, who are the ones who are generally taking interviews, who are the leaders right now, and though we're seeing a trickle of women, how are they actually coming into this and looking and saying that, okay, you know, my ambition is to really sponsor a female, really get her on board, empower her, mentor her. And I think as those small changes will make a bigger difference.
Thank you, Radhika. That's awesome. And does your company provide training for people who would like to transition to different industries?
Yeah, they do. So in fact, one of the key things that we are, I mean, in fact, from a diversity angle, we have a very strong focus that, you know, 50% gender diversity is something our CEO has put forward in terms of training and enabling people to go into different industry. That's something that we do. We're also looking at doing it from a graduate pool level. So people who are coming in from universities.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
I just want to say one more story before I go, which is something that I think a lot about. So when I finished my maternity and I was joining back to work, and in those days I was in consulting and strategy consulting. I remember the first project I was trying to get into, it was a lady, she was a project manager, and she asked me, oh, you're coming back from maternity, I'm sure you don't want to work hard, so I'm not really keen on having you on. So often we think that, you know, it is men who are biased, but equally you see women who are biased. And I remember going to my one of the senior leaders, and he told me that, Radhika, you can do anything you put your mind into. Don't let people, put you down or undermine you. So I do feel that the whole thing of bias and diversity, it's equal between men and women, and the onus is on both of us.
Yes, very good point, because sometimes women can be really hard on other women, can't they? Right. And, you know, there's no need for that, right? There's no need for bitchiness and for being nasty to other women, right? I know they do a lot of that on TV, but we don't need to do that in real life, right? We really don't need to. And in fact, I had some friends over from India here on the Gold Coast in Australia last night, and I was chatting to a beautiful mother and her 16-year-old daughter, and she said that when she had her child, that suddenly she became even more motivated to become successful in business. And she's a hugely successful business lady from the from Delhi, from New Delhi, the south side of Delhi, a very successful lady. And after she had a child, she was even more motivated. So, you know, there can be some misperceptions about that. I think when people do have children, it seems that they actually have more to live for and they are even more motivated. So it actually can really propel people forward in the area of success in workplaces as well. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. We'll go over to Tato now. Tato, from a woman's perspective, what gaps are yet to be closed for us to successfully build on this new paradigm, do you think?
Thanks for that question. I think there's still a lot to be done. I want to first recognize, as we all said, that there's progress, this things that have been done, and as one of the panelists said, that every big organization has got some kind of agenda on this topic. But I think we need to move past tick box exercise, because a lot of organization is because ESG is part of the governance, and you know, at the board session is something that they look at, and so it become a tick box exercise. So I want to echo what Vika said, that it needs to be intentional from the top, and it needs to be, you know, filtered down through behavior. So the leadership needs to demonstrate that. But to answer your question, I really think that you know, being intentional about capacity building, training, and professional development for women, it's still a gap for me. I know a lot of organizations, you know, are doing that and are intentional about that. But I think it can't just be sending off somebody to a course or, you know, providing that. It has to be a journey that we map out for each individual, something that is personalized for them and something that actually speaks to their own aspirations. as to opposed to just a generic thing. I think we all are customers sitting here in different areas, and we all know that customization is something that is key for all customers. So I think that's what's important, but also promoting synergies across gender equality agenda. So you find that it's in HR, it's an HR agenda, and an executive in IT, for example, or is not making it an agenda. So it has to be concerted efforts, and it has to be, we need to create synergies so that it's seen that it's a primary agenda of the business. And even if we take it outside of the workplace, right? If we take it into our communities, our government, we need to, there has to be cross-pollination across different agendas and different programs that is specifically around how do we address this gap. So for me, that's still a gap. And then creating better support system for women. I think today, even in the previous panel, the issue of maternity leave has been discussed in detail. And so it's part of the support system that we need to do, that when I come back, when I'm on maternity leave, during my pregnancy, even before I go there, how do I get treated in a way that is accommodating me? How do I get supported as somebody in the workplace without belittling me, without treating me like I'm somebody who doesn't belong there? So we need to create better systems that helps women to actually embrace their femininity, and we spoke about inherent feminine qualities that actually we deserve to embrace it as women and help us to actually function better and optimally as women and contribute towards the organization. So it's how then we can create this support business, because I think we all said equality versus equity. So it's about recognizing that I'm not equal to a man. I get pregnant, right? A man doesn't get pregnant. So if you recognize those physical differences, how then do we create better support system that enables that, but without belittling me? Still, I'm saying I'm expecting excellence from you, Tato, and that's exactly what I need to be judged on. And the opportunities that are then created for me should be based on what I deliver and the excellence that I then bring into my workplace. So I think really it's just about having foresight and being intentional around our efforts. Intentionality is important. And how men can then better support that is to listen more, we spoke about the empathy as one of the key things for leadership. It's really to listen with empathy, but with the intention to do better, with the intention to create and accommodate and create a safe space for everybody to feel like they belong. Because belonging then is something else that is a part of it that obviously has, we're not going to talk about it. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I love it, Tato. And your surname, Belong, almost sounds like belong, doesn't it? So, I love that. Most people just want to be loved. We just want to belong. And most people have issues like I'm not loved, or I don't belong, or I'm not good enough. And so as long as we've got hurting people out there, hurting people will hurt other people. Hurt people hurt people. And so I believe a big part of all of this, some absolute gems shared tonight so far, absolute huge part of it is coming back to self-love, loving self. And when we're kind and loving to ourselves, we are then kind and loving to others. Now over to Claude. Thank you for being patient there in the background, Claude. Do you think more laws and policies need to be implemented to get to gender equality? Or do you believe that information campaigns and incentives will be enough? What do you think, Claude? Just unmute yourself there. Claude, we can't hear you there. Just unmute yourself. Okay.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry,
all good. Thanks.
Coughing. I've got a bad cold. For me, it's quite simple. You need both, because you're not going to be successful. What we heard, before, yeah, we talk about it, but people don't really care, right? The top management, yeah, say it's nice, but it doesn't impact their bonuses, etc., etc. Now, once it's in the law, and look at South Africa, and I'm not sure how successful this was, but 10 years ago when I was there, there was, for each company we had to report under the number of obviously people by gender, by by race, etc., etc. And for me, that was the only way. South Africa tried very, very hard to promote to bring Black people back into the economy. Okay, still a requirement, and that's great. But without that, the situation would be a lot worse in South Africa. Again, same in France. Why are there so many women on boards? It's as simple as that, because it's law, and if you don't do that, and you're going to start paying fines. Now, one of the challenges we have, obviously, and a place like Accenture or even other technology companies, although Accenture, at least Accenture has a female CEO. So, but for me, it also starts at at school, right? There was reading something last night. The Girls Who Code. It's a kind of a program, and they've trained 500,000 students in 10 years. Now, how many people code around the world today? How many boys, men? It's millions and millions, right? So it's also going to take time. So for me, it's going through promoting these initiatives and, at absolutely all levels, because the challenge you have is that it's always the hardest part is always for the first person who comes in, right? I mean, I'm a big, wine fanatic, and there's a woman which, in Argentina, called Susana Balbo. I don't know whether you've heard about her, but she became the first, female winemaker in 1980 in Argentina. And what she keeps saying is that, for me, and she had a degree, she had everything. She was the only one at the university, only female. And she said the most difficult for me was to get in there. Once I got my job, I delivered. It was absolutely fine. And then so many people followed. So for me, again, it needs to be imposed from the top, whether it's a law. And then I think there's a need also to have some common themes, because I'm sure, across the world, in different regions, different countries, people are reinventing the wheel, right? So it would be great but it's a little bit like climate change also, right? You look at how complicated it is to come to an agreement, right? For me, it's similar, although it should be easier, because climate change has some massive impact in terms of company profitabilities. These are 30, 50-year investments. For gender equality, it should be a lot easier now. Who needs to take ownership? I'm not sure whether it's the UN, whether it's the specific organizations, but I think for me there would be value in having these topics discussed at the highest level, whether it's the G20, and in fact, if you look at the G20, right, there is a part of the organization which is the G20 for women or something. So, but how do we bring this together and put programs in place that are applicable to all the around the world?
Oh, yes. Great question. Fantastic, Claude. Love your opinions on that. Thank you so much for sharing. And in fact, all the panelists here, we've only got a few minutes left. I want to get to Julia Richards' question here. Thank you, Julia, for this. She's putting out to all the panelists, what are you doing to address pay gap issues in your companies? Who would like to answer that? Just unmute yourself. Pay gap issues in your companies. What are you doing to address that? Who'd like to share on that one? Just unmute yourself or pop your hand up so I can see. Is anyone doing anything?
Just a quick one, Aldrin. I'm not addressing it, but I'm just making an observation. I'm hoping that one of my panelists will actually come with a drift. An observation is that most women, so what contributes as well to the pay gap is that most women don't have the confidence to negotiate when they start a job, or even for promotion, or for a pay rise, right? For an increase on the payment. So most women shy away from doing that. They're apologetic. So when the time comes and they have to talk about that, then they shy away from it. They're apologetic. They say, I would like to have a 10%, and they meek about it, and they not say, this is what I deserve, and this is what I should get because of 1, 2, 3. So they're not direct and open about it. And I think if we start with that, already we're starting on an equal footing, because if I start, for example, as an analyst, and then my fellow male comes in as an analyst, they're going to negotiate better. So already when we start on an equal pay. And unfortunately, some or most of the HR people, HR practitioners, then don't say, they don't disclose they would have a target and they would have, this is the maximum or the range for this particular position. But then they know that, women are struggling to negotiate better, and they will just meet them where they're selling themselves short. And the guys would know that this position is at this, and I'm going to reach for that. I'm actually going to aim for that. And then negotiate down, then it reaches somewhere in the middle. So I think it's an observation, but I'm hoping that there's people in here that are professionals in that they can come up with, they can help with the solution. I saw Elena had a.
Yes, beautiful. Love that. Thank you so much, Tato. And Vikas, so you're unmuted there. You want to share something on this topic?
Yes, I want to, but I saw Elena raising her hand, so maybe I think she had a point to make. So let her go first, and after that I'll.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just have a quick, like a quick comment. So then as a recruiter, when I prepare my candidates, for example, or we're getting offers, obviously I'm in a position of kind of negotiating more for our female candidates, and I just coaching them, and I just kind of opening eyes on what actually they can get and why you're asking less, and like literally coaching them on how to have a conversation with a hiring manager and HR when it comes to negotiating that higher salary. But I would love to hear from Vikas then, what do you do specifically inside of the company, like to get rid of this gap?
Right.
Yes.
Fantastic question, but I think my answer is going to disappoint you guys, because I'm not doing anything to, by the way, bridge the gap, because, I think we're just lucky that we don't have a gap in the wages between men and women, in the organization. Tech sector is a very competitive sector, where skills are premium. And very often you just run after the skills, right? You don't sort of look at the compensation. But there is a lesson, I think, for companies who still have to bridge this gap. There's a stunning piece of data that I just read from a McKinsey report. And that data is saying that the women in the leadership are actually leaving, right? They are rather switching their jobs at a faster rate than men. So for every one woman that gets promoted to a director level, there are two women who are leaving the organization, right? And this is catastrophic, for organizations, because already there's a dearth of women leadership in many, many organizations. And the reason they're doing it is because it's now well established that women are just as ambitious as men, right? So if they get a signal that it's harder for them to advance, right? If they get this signal that they're not being paid, right, as per their seniority, as per the skill sets that they bring to the table, they will leave. And there is a greater, I suppose, understanding and awareness and consciousness among the competition of these companies that they are very, they're very willing to take this very, very talented woman. So I think it doesn't require to bridge the gap in wages doesn't require a lot of effort. I think it just requires basic common sense. You've got a job description. What's the definition of the success looks like for that particular job description and for that role. And if you find the talent, right, irrespective of whether he's a man or a woman, just make sure that the money which is given to that individual is commensurate to the skill sets and the success that person will bring, right? Beyond that, I don't think there is, we need to make it more complicated. But if we do make it complicated and if we find excuses, right, to undermine and underpay women, well, I think show them the McKinsey report, because it's going to hurt the bottom line.
Yes, Vikas, love it. Great work. Well, you are definitely leading by example there. Absolutely love that. Great question there by Julia Richards. Thank you so much. What are you doing to address pay gap issues in your companies? And for those who are watching us right now, who are participating here, please pop in the comments. What's your opinion on this, right? What do you think? What do you think we could do? How can men help to build a new paradigm for women? Please let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your opinion on this, because this is not about anyone being right or wrong. We're giving our opinions. We're sharing the best way we can with our knowledge, and it's been an absolutely fantastic panel today. We've heard from people all over the world, and what an amazing diverse group of awesome people here. It's been an absolute pleasure to moderate here on the My Voice Forum Global 2022 We've heard from Elena Liaponova, Vikas Shrivastava, Claude Sasulas, Tato Balang, and Radhika Uni. It has been an absolute pleasure. My name is Aldwin Altay, Media Queen. And as Gandhi says, be the change you wish to see in the world. And as I say, shine bright and light up all those around you. Thank you so much, Neera and Shikha, absolute legends putting this together this year. What an amazing, amazing forum you have put together. Absolutely awesome. Thank you so much. And now I'll hand the mic back to you, Neera. Thank you for our panelists, and thank you to all those who participated in the chat as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
Thanks for having us
Really
here.
great.
Please do stay on because we are going to do a group picture. But before we do the group picture, I do want to say I loved all the discussion points. There was so much honesty in everything our panelists shared. I'm so happy to see that there is a paradigm shift that's already happening, and that how important male allyship is for that to happen. So thank you, Aldwin, for moderating the session so wonderfully. Thank you to our panelists, Vikas, Radhika, Elena, Tato, and Claude, for bringing in all the insights to such an important topic. And of course, thank you to everybody who are attending this today. So many great comments and questions were coming in. Do feel free to connect with our moderator and panelists. Like I mentioned before, their LinkedIn details are all shared on the chat. And of course, if you wanted to know the personal journey of Aldwin and Tato, please grab a copy of the Amazon #1 bestseller book, My Voice, Volume 2 and Volume 1. And for Radhika, shaken, stirred, but not deterred. Details are on the chat as well. And of course, please look out for Elena's story in My Voice, Volume 6, to be released next year. And with that, let's do a group picture. Okay. And one more. Claude, we can't see your hands. There we go. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here today.